You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, Jimmy Ott and Paul Stone talking college football from a handicapping perspective. Our best bets here. So we do two of these weekly for college football on the Sports Bettor's Paradise. We do the top profile games, the high profile games, ones you're going to be watching for sure. You want a little action on, we're going to give you an opinion on those. And then that's our best bets later on in the week. That's what we get to right now. Paul, let's get to your first one right now. Texas, a lot of eyes on Texas. Do have a bit of a favorable schedule. And then Colorado State coming to town. And Colorado State under Norvell coming over there from Nevada should be on the improve as well. This is a big, big number. And, boy, you peek ahead as well. And Texas got that rare trip to Ann Arbor, Michigan to take on the defending champion Wolverines. Texas 32.5 and 60.5.
Yeah, this game last week was actually 35.5, and Big Group released Colorado State, so now we're at 32.5. But I still believe that this what I believe will be an improved Colorado State team. In fact, I think they're going to make their first bowl game in 7 years since back in 2017. I think the Rams can keep it within 4 touchdowns against the 4th-ranked Longhorns. You know, first of all, one of their big off-season victories was keeping talented wide receiver Torrey Horton there in Fort Collins. Horton, one of the best receivers in all of college football, group of 5 or otherwise. In the last 2 seasons, collectively, Horton has 167 catches for 2,267 yards and 16 touchdowns. I don't know if anybody keeps statistics. I guess you could figure it out by hand, but I don't know if anybody's got a better two-year total than Torrey Horton with those receiving numbers there. Their sophomore quarterback, Braden Fowler-Nicolosi, last year he threw for 3,460 yards, did have some interception issues through 16 picks. So hopefully, from the Rams' perspective anyway, he takes better care of the football in year 2 as a starter, and one would expect that he might. Colorado State last year, they threw the ball on 61% of their offensive plays. That's quite high. They protected their quarterback, Fowler-Nicolosi, quite well. It actually only allowed 14 sacks. He was sacked on 2.71% of the passing plays. That ranked 5th nationally, so they did a really good job protecting their quarterback. The Longhorns also going to be breaking in 2 new starting defensive tackles. Last year's guys who were a big part of that Longhorn success, Byron Murphy and Tivondre Sweat, now off to the NFL. So I think the Rams going to be able to move the ball a little bit on the Longhorns. I think they're good for 17, maybe more points. And as you mentioned, Jimmy, I think it's natural for Texas to have one eye looking north to Ann Arbor. Next week they go to Michigan to play the defending champion Wolverines. I'll take Colorado State plus 32.5 over Texas.
Yes, indeed. And with handicapping college football, man, I'm a big believer in situational handicapping, and you got one there. There's always check and see, what the big games will be the following week. I mean, it is emotion and focus is way more of a factor at the college level than the NFL. All right, let's get to my first best bet, and we go to ACC versus SEC. Virginia Tech 13.5 and 50.5. Against Vanderbilt. So, the third-year coaches, man, sometimes it kind of clicks. Getting kind of their guys, a little continuity. And, boy, they got a lot returning in Blacksburg, Virginia for Brent Pry's third year. They went 5-3 in the conference, their best record since 2019. Returned a lot of starters on this Virginia Tech team, including their big physical quarterback, Drones, who really, he's a big physical. A lot of athletes, a lot of athletic guys playing quarterback in college football that coaches are trying to develop as passers. He got better and better passing, so really encouraged about him. And he's got a little bit of a supporting cast this year as well. They finished 7-6 last year with that bowl win against Tulane. Third season, a lot of continuity coming back. And Vandy, just a little bit of a mess. Let's face it. Is there a tougher job in all of college football than Vanderbilt playing in the SEC? I'm going to take the Hokies. It's a big number for the first game where you got to work some offensive kinks out. but the continuity, a lot of things in place to maintain some continuity from last year. Take Virginia Tech minus the 13.5. Paul, let's go to your next one. We're going to go to Boise State, making a trip around across the country. They're going to Georgia Southern. Boise State, the Broncos, who are a little bit of a favorable pick, fashionable pick, maybe even to get into the college football playoff as that group of 5 champion. Boise State 13 on the road here.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think Boise State certainly among the most viable contenders for the group of 5 spot in the inaugural 12-team playoff this year. And I think everyone expects that the committee is going to have a really difficult choice. I mean, Liberty might go undefeated, but we saw what they did last year against Oregon when they stepped up in class, so that could be a mark against the Flames. Boise's probably going to lose, at Oregon fairly decisively. Memphis may or may not lose at Florida State. But I think they're going to have, with the disparity in schedules and just some of the elements there, it's going to be a really tough decision for the committee to pick this group of 5 team. So with that, what I think that means from kind of a betting perspective and Boise State's perspective here is you need to stack up style points. Some people say style points don't matter, but they matter. Huh. So you got to stack them up early and often. And what that means in this opener is defeating Georgia Southern by 2 touchdowns or more. You need to go ahead and open things off on the right foot. First of all, Boise State offensively, they have got perhaps at least one of the top running backs in all of college football, a guy named Ashton Jeanty, who was under-recruited out of Frisco's Lone Star High School there outside of Dallas, goes to Boise State, might be the first drafted running back in next spring's NFL draft. He is just a downhill runner, just an old-style, tough running back. Yards after contact, rushed for 1,347 yards last year, 14 touchdowns, averaged a little bit over 6 yards a carry there for the Boise State Broncos. So really like Jeanty, again, just a prototypical downhill, tough guy runner. You look at Georgia Southern, meanwhile, kind of offensive-minded under Clay Helton. They lose their top receiver, Caleb Hood, who had 101 catches last year. Their starting quarterback, Davis Brin, and then much of its offensive line. They're not going to average, I don't think, 30 points a game again this year. And you look at Boise State. I like to look at these technical angles occasionally, especially when you have a little bit of a sample size. Since the start of the 2008 season, so we're talking about the last 16 seasons, Boise State 46, 26-1 against the spread as an away favorite. That's 64%. That'll keep the lights on and keep a little gas in the tank, so to speak. I like Boise to go on the road to Statesboro and defeat Georgia Southern. Boise minus 13.
All right, and our final best bet of the day, a little double barrel pick. Both Paul and I on this game. Going to Houston, 1.5 and 54.5. Now, Houston making a coaching change, and usually is the case with a coaching change. It's tough to maintain your roster, and you're going to get hit a little bit. And Houston did. So they bring in Willie Fritz, and their roster is not where it's going to be in the future. But still Willie Fritz. Willie Fritz, at 27 years of coaching, has had a losing season one time, and that was when Hurricane Ida hit in New Orleans in 2021 and forced them to move out of state, forced them to move their home opener against Oklahoma to Norman, and it was just a disaster. He cleaned house. He didn't like how a lot of the staff handled it, and he went on to win a bunch of games at Tulane, including a Cotton Bowl along the way. So Central Missouri, Sam Houston State, Georgia Southern, and Tulane, he has only had one losing season in 27 years. So catching UNLV at home, and a lot of UNLV love out there. A lot of them picking them to finish high in the conference and have another good season. And Barry Odom had a great season last year for UNLV. But so much of what they did was around their quarterback, who's now at USC. Houston does have a returning quarterback with a lot of starts under his belt in Donovan Smith. So, first game, again, those key spots. Houston minus 1.5 at home against UNLV. I'm on Willie Fritz in his home opener here, Paul, against the Running Rebels, along with you.
Yeah, Jimmy, I tell you, you and I both on those Houston Cougars on Saturday in the Bayou City. First of all, looking at UNLV last year, very successful season, won 9 games in the regular season. But you look at that schedule last year, and they made most of their hay against lower division opponents. And as you mentioned, their quarterback, Jaden Mayava, he's off to Southern Cal after the conclusion of the season. So, these were quality opponents. I want to look at their last two games last year. And in those last two games against Boise State and Kansas, that UNLV defense gave up 1,118 yards total, 81 points, a whopping 8.4 yards per play. I'm not, suggesting that Houston's offense is up to the standard of either Boise or Kansas. It is not. In fact, the Cougars picked by most to finish either 15th or 16th in the newly configured 16-team Big 12. Plus, Houston, they do have a first-year head coach in Willie Fritz, as you pointed out, but he's a guy who's had success, as you also pointed out, everywhere that he's been. Leaves Tulane, they're New Orleans after 8 successful seasons. But the Cougars, they are a Big 12 school, and the Big 12 is a tough conference, extremely balanced league with no easy outs. I don't think Houston, especially once Fritz gets a few games under his belt there, is going to be an easy out in the Big 12 this year, even in his first season. What Fritz does have at his disposal is an experienced dual-threat quarterback in Donovan Smith. He's a guy who's 6'5" and 235 pounds. He started a total of 20 games at the collegiate level, split between Texas Tech and Houston. A true dual-threat guy. He's passed for almost 5,500 yards in his career, ran for 428 yards last year at Houston. Many draft sites, if you look at those sites at this point, they're listing him as a potential NFL draft choice next April, so those guys look at him favorably. You look at this line, and Houston only being favored by 1 point at home against UNLV, it infers that UNLV would be favored over Houston at a neutral site. And I just don't buy into that. I don't think that's the case. Again, Fritz, he won a total of 23 games the last 2 years at Tulane. Houston also, they've got a difficult schedule. They've got this game, the opener at home, and then week 3 game at home against Rice. And those might be the two most winnable games on their schedule. So I think you're going to give it a little bit extra gas when you've got a game that might be one of your few winnable games on the schedule, perhaps their best shot at a victory. I think UNLV is a little bit overblown going into 2024. I like the Cougars -1.5 over the Rebels.
Yeah, and a common theme, again, Houston in a very deep Big 12. Yeah, is figured to be, have a rough time this year. But is that a product of their, is that what, we're thinking their conference schedule is? Their overall schedule is going to be? It's going to be an awfully tough time for them to even break even this year. I get it, but they're also catching them early in the season. And also, it's a team that was this close to beating Texas last year. There's a lot of, but the biggest thing is UNLV. A lot of what they did last year was their quarterback, and it built around. Odom, give him credit. UNLV is one of the best years they've had in a long, long time. But the continuity after losing their leader and a guy like Willie Fritz, man, he's as good as they can get, no doubt about that. So that's our best bets up for this week. We look at the high-profile games and the best bets, 2 separate podcasts each and every week. College football. From Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott of the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.